Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. So I'm talking to you today on November 1st. It's not obviously going to be uploaded on November 1st, but this is Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead. We are just at the end of the October season where I did an offering every day trying to resolve ancestral karma and ancestral curses to try and release the burdens of the past. It's a time where we are letting go of the energies of the previous year. In a lot of magical systems, October 31st is actually New Year. So, in some ways, this is New Year's Day and a new beginning and a new season begins. And it starts with the season of rest and putting things to rest. And today I'm talking to you about hauntings and what they really are, what caused them. I'm going to tell you a couple of true stories from my own life to try and help you understand what causes the perception of a spirit being in an area. And sometimes it's really a spirit, and sometimes it's an energy signature. And I'm going to explain how that might happen. Please remember that in this particular field, very little is proven. And so it's all a lot of theory, but it holds a lot of validity and is backed up by what people understand about hauntings and hauntings that have been seen, particularly across the United States, which are the ones that I'm going to be most familiar with. But before I get started, I need to put the housekeeping at the top of the podcast these days. By the way, the numbers keep telling me you would prefer episodes with me and Jacob versus interviews. There will still be interviews coming to you, but there will be fewer of those and more of these kind of educational, explanatory, and spiritual teaching podcasts, as well as breaking down some well-known spiritual concepts. If you want to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session, and please remember, I do a form of tarot that helps you confront what you need to heal so that all of your outcomes are improved. And I do predictive tarot as well. There's a place for that. It helps sometimes to know what is coming. What is far more helpful is understanding the things that we do that sometimes keep our best outcomes from coming to us, the things that we need to heal in order to be in our highest vibration, to be in alignment, to have our full ability to manifest the life that we want coming to us, and to find our purposeful path. And you do that at therisingmoon.com. It's the only way to book me. There are scammers that clone pretty much every spiritual worker and tarot worker. So be aware of that. If somebody hits you up on Instagram, if somebody is approaching you on TikTok, if somebody is approaching you on any platform, it will never be me. I am never going to cold call you, as Jacob said. My YouTube channel is Cronecast at the Rising Moon. We've got a Patreon coming. I've got a Patreon coming for you probably about the beginning of the year. It will have things like the Spirit Guide Daily is returning through a Patreon, which is a daily energy read. It's going to have some guided meditations. It's going to have the monthly magic lesson as well. I'm looking forward to rolling it out. A lot of work goes into preparing for it, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that that is coming. And for the month of December, I will have the Spirit Guide Dump Daily available on my YouTube channel. And as of the first of the year, it will move to a Patreon or a membership level. Because I do have to make a living just like absolutely everybody else. I believe in providing as many free resources as I possibly can, but I also have to look out for my own interests in a way that will allow me to keep helping people find as many free resources as possible and bringing you as many free resources as possible. So that's the housekeeping for today. Let's get to what hauntings are, spirit mediumship, and also the understanding that non-human entities can come into play in the world of hauntings, of ghosts, of spirits. Are non-human entities the exact same thing as demons? No, they are not. And when you think demon, please disregard biblical or religious doctrine around demons. It is a form of life that is feeding off a particular energy, and so will attempt to influence your thinking and your actions to get the energy that it wants. And I know that this can sound like very woo-woo and very ungrounded, and I'm a very grounded person. What you need to remember is that as little as 150 years ago, half of the things we now accept to be true would have been viewed as being outlandish. That invisible things like bacteria or viruses had such sway over our physical health and our mental health as well. And we have learned to understand it because the technology was developed to perceive these things. And my belief about most of this, including tarot, including the fact that it does have to do with the structure of time and being able to kind of transcend being at a particular point in time in order to perceive both the past and the future. In order to do that, it is, again, working with something scientific versus being in contradiction with something that is scientific. It's simply science that is not understood yet. That is my belief. Now, do I have any facts, data, or studies to back that up? No, this is kind of a developing field always. As our technology becomes more advanced, I'm assuming that the ability to track these sort of things will as well. Now, things like spirit mediumship have been around for a long, long time. I'm going to lead with the one cautionary thing that I try to get even my clients know. Now, can I do spirit mediumship? Yes, I can. But anybody who has been a client of mine or is a client of mine knows that I will only do it under particular circumstances when it is an earthbound spirit trying to release karma to make amends for something that they did in this lifetime so that they can release that karma and move on free and clear, potentially without having to reincarnate, or potentially to end soul contracts in order to resolve the karma of the living as well. And that's what I think spirit mediumship is best used for. And it is not that I look down on it, it is that it is one of the areas where people are most likely to encounter very advanced trickster energies. So if you're interested in spirit mediumship, or if you wish to go to a spirit medium, please go to a very reputable one, and there are wonderful ones out there. There are people who can genuinely do this, who can help you achieve closure on grief. For me, as I said, I only take the sort of spirit mediumship that helps people on their spiritual path. The things that they need to resolve in a relationship from their standpoint have been cut short too soon, or the spirit itself has something that it wishes to resolve. But some people are trying to maintain a relationship past basically the lifespan of somebody. And I feel that personally, it has the potential to hold people back. And so that is why I've never really committed a lot of time to doing spirit mediumship. I only do it to help people understand themselves and to help them grow. That is not to say that's the only role that it has, but when you are seeking out a spirit medium, understand that it needs to be done in very cleared and protected circumstances, that it is best to do an energetic clearing afterwards, because even if your spirit medium has contacted exactly the person that you were trying to talk to, that's not the only thing that's tried to come to that spirit medium. And things can get attached, because spirit attachments are very common, to the clients. So if you're going to go to a spirit medium, I'm not dissuading you from that. Really, there are very, very good people in this. Please go home and do some form of energetic clearing. It can be as simple as listening to a sound balancing, a chakra balancing, because vibrational sound can actually dispel all kinds of icky things that are trying to cling to you. Icky, not being a very scientific term, but I think everybody knows what I mean. So having gotten the proviso or the cautionary tale or the disclaimer out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what is a haunting really? Well, first of all, we have to go back to the idea that there are, I'm going to have to close this door. We've got the beeping from where coming back. Yes, I'm still wearing pajama pants if people are tuning in on my YouTube channel where I put up these video versions. So a haunting, you have to think about the structure of time again, and the fact that, again, this is not woo-woo science, this is not junk science, this is science. Time is happening all at once. It is our consciousness being at a particular positioning system. I told you in another podcast to think of it as almost being part of a GPS. The idea in the law of attraction that the universe does not understand time is completely false. We don't understand time, but the universe has a beat on it because it works and flow with it all the time. And again, your consciousness is at a particular position. When we are trying to achieve connection to what might have been or what might be, then we're reaching outside of that stream because it's available, because it's happening all at once. And that actually accounts for a lot of hauntings. And to explain what I mean, I'm going to tell you a story about a person I knew growing up. He has been dead for kind of a while. He was the husband of one of my mother's friends, and he's a very interesting person. His name was Ken Stewart. And interestingly enough, when he was 5 years old, he was a twin. He had an identical twin. He was growing up on a ranch. When he was 5 years old, there was an industrial farming accident, and a piece of equipment basically caused a catastrophe within a barn. Ken went one way, his twin went the other, and his twin went right into the path of danger and was killed. And so throughout the course of his life, Ken would be seen in areas that he was not, sometimes issuing warnings for people, telling them not to go into a particular place, that they would report back to him, hey, how did you even know? He's like, well, I was 200 miles away, so I genuinely didn't know anything. That his twin spirit seemed to be attached to this earthly plane because they were part of a whole. And so until Ken passed, his twin was there as well. And whenever he was in my mother's home, which I lived with my mother briefly for a couple of years, between the ages of like 16 and 19 before I moved very far away. So I did see him frequently, or fairly frequently. Something weird always happened around Ken. His twin could be perceived, he could be seen. Sometimes he actually did things. Ken was very psychically sensitive as well. And this story comes from him because there's a person who was very, very open to these things and, in fact, had a lot of spirit contact through his deceased brother. He was living in a home in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. He was renting. And in that home, because he was very open to spirits and ghosts, he would hear crying at night. And it was just inconsolable and sobbing. And it was down by the furnace in the basement. And he would go down there and he kept finding the apparition of somebody who could see through, of a youngish woman somewhere around, between 25 and 30, with her head in her hands, sobbing, sitting on a stump near a wood pile by the furnace as well, just sobbing and sobbing. And whenever Ken would call out to her, do you need anything? Can I help you? It almost seemed as if the spirit would turn and look at him, so he got a full view of her face and then disappear. And this happened over and over and over again. Ken was not the best with money. And so he was running a little late on his rent one time, and he had to take it to his landlord's downtown office. And as he goes into this building and tries to get into the elevator in order to go up to his landlord's office, the elevator doors open, and he's been living in this home for months. And in front of him in the elevator is this young woman. Looks her dead in the face. She's 100% alive. She greets him. They pass by each other. He is, of course, rattled to the core because she's alive. She's living and breathing. He gets up to his landlord's office. He's as white as a ghost himself. And the landlord asks, is anything wrong? And Ken just spills the entire tale. I just passed the ghost who is haunting your home in the elevator. And he said, well, that's my daughter. She was involved with a drug dealer. She was married to a drug dealer who was very, very abusive. And when she was living in that home, she was being very badly abused. That is the condensation. That is the easiest form of telling people what causes a lot of hauntings. You are not actually seeing the ghost of somebody. You are seeing an energetic imprint that is caused by extreme feelings that leaves behind, because again, time happening all at once, an energy signature that can be perceived outside of time if you're a person who is sensitive already. Because all psychics, all people who are empaths, what we are doing is, even though we're at this positioning system, since time is happening all at once, you can start to reach out to the other areas, both the past and to the future. And it's just kind of that simple for, I'm going to say, about 50% of the hauntings. The more pronounced the trauma or the emotion is, how clear the signature will be. There's a place called Harper's Ferry in, I believe it's West Virginia, where the John Brown Raiders came through and basically slaughtered the town. And they have a lot of ghost tours, and they talk about these things happening at the same time every day. A particular spirit seen going up Alane and now crossing through a wall that didn't happen to be there at the time of the Civil War. That is another instance of, it's just a programmed signature that you are able to see because something traumatic was about to happen. If you have heard of how haunted Gettysburg is, that is another thing that when it's very still, you can hear battles, you can encounter spirits. So that's one form. But there are forms of haunting that still have the consciousness or the sentience of that particular individual still attached to that energy signature. So that when the person dies, essentially their spirit almost loops back to that defining moment, the thing that they're trying to release, the thing that caused them too much pain to heal from. And that accounts for another, like these are made up percentages, but think of it about another 25% of hauntings. So we've covered about 75% of hauntings. The good half of them really are, you're just seeing somebody. The reason most ghosts don't interact with the people around them is that it's not really their spirit. It's a remnant or an energy signature or almost like an old recording. You're seeing the signature of this person who almost wore a groove into this reality quite frequently through repetitive tasks or leading right up to an event that may have killed them. And that's where the bulk of their living energy ended, and it left behind an imprint. In the case where the sentient presence of the person is still attached, because time is happening all at once at the time of death, some people cannot relinquish their attachment to the living world. And so their spirit is caught in this loop. And they will be in that energy, but also able to perceive what the consciousness of the person in the point of time who is seeing them. So they're able to interact, they're able to do things. My own biggest haunting of my life, I lived in a 1912 house in Denver, Colorado. And so much happened in that house that I stopped talking about it because I just felt like I sounded like a lunatic talking about all the times that things would get moved or people love that house, by the way. It was not in the least malicious. It seemed to be a very protective spirit. And it was largely centered in the room where my son's bedroom was. And he still loves that house the best of any place that we lived to this day. He had very good associations with it, and it never bothered him and it never frightened him. But he actually was aware that there was something in there. And it had a tendency to interact a lot more with me because I would be up in the middle of the night a lot at that particular point in my life. I had a lot of insomnia. Frankly, that was a period of my life where I was not dealing with trauma very well. And so I was engaging in substance abuse. And so I didn't have normal sleeping patterns. It didn't last for very long in my life. And it was something that I decided to overcome myself. I didn't have to go to any programs. I just realized what I was doing and made myself stop, which is, again, what differentiates me from what is like addiction, where people truly cannot stop themselves from being compelled. I have enough willpower that when I recognize a toxic or a destructive pattern, I simply stop it. And it can be very, very difficult indeed. But it was during that period of my life, and I had stopped and I was not sleeping regularly. And so that was what was going on. It was Fioricet. It had been prescribed to me for migraines. And I was given an unlimited supply, not being told at the time, hey, this is highly addictive. When I stopped, it caused a disruption in my sleeping pattern for about 3 years, quite frankly. And so I was up in the middle of the night quite a bit, and I encountered a lot in that house. And in that instance, that appeared to be a real haunting, where the person's consciousness, for reasons and it was an older man, for reasons I do not understand, stayed in the house. I did not wish to interact directly with the spirit, and so it was often very frightening for me. And mostly it would be like I would put something down, turn around, turn back, and it would be on the other side of the room. And it was that simple. I never saw things floating across the room. It was more that it's like, I could swear that book was there 2 minutes ago. And it was stuff like that. Over and over again, people would come over. Some people would hear a man's voice. A lot of people commented on the peaceful energy. It was a very happy and protective spirit. And to this day, I do not know if it was attached to the house or if it was someone who was attached to me for some reason, because I've had something protecting me since I was a child. Now, bad things happened to me, but I got really good outcomes. And that's what I always tried to measure the level of protection that I received against, was that, yes, I had a terribly abusive and deprived childhood, but I also always had something seemingly protecting me from the greatest harm so that I would survive it, and then guiding me towards healing as I got older. And whenever I fell, it felt like something was as in the case of realizing it's like, wow, Fioricet is not my friend. Something basically kept nudging at me in my own consciousness until I recognized that and stopped it. And that may have been what the spirit in that house was. I don't think that it was that alone, because after moving from that home, the next home, and the thing that really proved to me, oh no, that house was terribly haunted, was that nothing happened in the next 2 houses that I lived in, 3 houses. Nope, I'm sorry. By the 3rd house, there was a ghost in that house, but that one was very obvious. That was the renter in the home right before we bought it. His teenage son died of a heroin overdose. And so a lot of things happened in that house. I had to live in it for 6 months by myself when my ex-husband had been transferred to California. And like, I would get locked out of it if I took the dogs out. And like, I had to have, I actually kept a key outside in a lockbox because it happened that frequently. There were other things that would go on. I tried to stay out of the area that I knew that he had been his room. He didn't bother me all that much, but the spirit was clearly there. People who die under traumatic events sometimes don't understand that they're dead, and their spirit lingers behind. And sometimes when people are trying to work off karma, they have a 100-year period where there will be something called the disincarnate. And when we're talking about ghosts, that is frequently what happens. People will talk about waking up in the middle of the night and they see their grandmother and it turned out she died like 6 hours earlier and she came for a last visitation. That is one form of haunting, but it's really like the person releasing their earthly ties and making one last visitation to a person before moving on to either their next incarnation or to a disincarnate state where none of us really knows what happens. But most disincarnates, which are what we're talking about when we're talking about ghosts, not the people being contacted through spirit mediums, although spirit mediums can be a form of spiritual teacher who helps those disincarnate people realize, listen, the time for you, you missed your opportunity to go towards a different form of being. That's what the light is, being a different form of being. It is a disembodied one. And some spirits, if they die particularly very unhappy or very angry or very traumatically, will either not realize that they have gone or they're not ready to let go, because they have unresolved trauma or unresolved pain, or they're simply confused. That is what most people think of when we think of ghosts. So there are entire shows dedicated to, like hunting ghosts, and people always make fun of whenever why can't you ever get these on camera? Why can't these things ever be recorded? Because they are being perceived in a way that is not as necessarily visible to the naked eye, but there is something called a psychic eye. There is that intuitive thing. And please remember, this is, again, we're going to backtrack a little bit into science. The way our vision shapes our reality, and this is why so many people say we're living in a simulation. Not exactly. Your vision essentially perceives things and fills in details around it. And so it is simulating things. And it's why you can think something is one thing from a distance, get up on it and be like, oh, that's a cow. It wasn't a person. Is that your brain initially will try to organize what it is seeing into a pattern, and it sees a person, and then you get up to the thing and it's a different thing. And so that's how our vision is always simulating our reality. And your vision can also perceive things that are not visible to the naked eye, but again, are contained in a slightly different reality or outside the stream of time that is the fixed consciousness point where you are standing, where your consciousness is. And so you are perceiving these things. Essentially, you see through your third eye and your solar plexus, which is your personal power and your ability to perceive. Sometimes they will catch things on film, but that is the reason that so many things can't be recorded. And there are people who will swear up and down, there's nothing after life. I don't believe in ghosts. That is a form of extremist thinking. It's always amusing to me that particularly people who are atheists think that they are very different from people of tremendous faith. It's this exact same psychological mechanism, just turned in a different direction. It is absolute conviction that you know that which is not truly knowable from this position. It's that simple. It is a defined and a rigid form of thinking, and in which people, that is how they organize their reality. That is how they perceive their safety. That is how they process information. Whereas a truly scientific mindset is understanding that what has not been proven today may be proven tomorrow. And that if enough people are saying they're having a particular experience, that there is likely an explanation behind it. There may be a brain function that accounts for some of the near-death experiences where people have seen the light, seeing dead relatives, seeing all of these things over and over again. Or it may simply be that that really is our next form of being. When it comes to disincarnate spirits, which is what we're really talking about with what causes hauntings, we've covered the programmed into time and space through repetition, through the person investing a lot of their life's energy, you perceiving a different point in time without realizing it type of spirit. And that happens to people who are sensitive. It will happen to people with very strong personalities, by the way. If very strong personalities lived in a household, if there was a lot of extreme emotion, and it can be positive emotion, as in the case of the house that I lived in Denver. Whoever that spirit was, they were very, very fond of my son. And it, like, not in a creepy way, but he was always aware that he wasn't alone in that house. And he was a fearful kid, and he was not afraid of that. Now, why was he a fearful kid? People with like a good imagination who read a great deal quite frequently are fearful. When we're talking about the disincarnate spirits that have a consciousness attached to them, sometimes it will be people who did something karmically punishable in their lifetime that causes them to be retained, like their essence, their spirit, their soul can't fully move on until they have spent a period of time essentially suffering, aware that they are no longer living and unable to really interact with the living. And that's where the concept of hell quite frequently comes from, is people being caught in a dark energy before their soul is allowed to move on. Typically, it's supposed to be 100 years. People can curse somebody to that, but it's usually not a good idea. And I've covered before the karmic curse that I did. And the very first time that I did it, I eventually scaled it back and removed that, because initially I was like, the person needs to be sentenced to that 100-year period on this particular earth. And after like a little while, as I was healing, I was like, no, that's very personal. That's from my point of like, that's not practicing sound nor fair judgment. So I released that part and just gave it entirely over to like, hey, make sure other people protect it. That's the only thing I ever wanted out of this, and I released the rest of it. So sometimes disincarnate people will be people who were cursed in life. Now, here's something that you need to understand about cursing people. If that person did not truly mean to wrong you, if their intent was clear, or if they were not engaging in human frailty nor weakness, it won't work. You can't just decide you're going to curse somebody because you don't like them. It has to be something that can intermingle with the energy that they have reached for and define their energy. And disincarnate spirits are not always people who have been cursed. They can be people who, again, are simply trying to work through the pain, the outrage, the grief. Places like Auschwitz are very, very haunted because people experience, and the spirits are not being punished. Please remember that when infinity lies on the other side of something, 100 years is not that big of a deal, and it is only part of their soul. We think of the soul as being a finite thing, like something that has a shape, a form. It is just this thing, like a pie. It's not that. Our consciousness, our soul, our spirit has an infinite capacity, and it may be the part of them that is still dealing with processing that pain, while the other part of them, the part of them that is not tied to their emotions, but rather to their spirit and to their soul, has actually moved on and is waiting to be joined by that remnant, that fragment. And on this, the Day of the Dead, when people honor their ancestors, and the saying is that the veil is thinnest, it means that as the ground and the earth becomes fallow, as it is no longer a growing season, but rather a resting season, that you are able to perceive those living energies that have been consigned to the resting period. When there's a great deal of trauma, outrage, injustice, and brutality, often the disincarnate spirits will still have a consciousness attached to them as they are processing often a feeling of, I almost want to say, confusion around the horror that human beings are capable of perpetrating against each other. That's why I'm always talking about like your darker side, your shadow side, which contains all of that. It's something that you learn to live in conjunction with rather than to deny, because we all have the capacity to do tremendously evil things. Goodness and spirituality and love are all contained within our ability to make choices. We all have the opportunity to simply choose to do the better things, to overcome that darker aspect. And we will have something called anniversary events as well, where this energy signature repeating over the course of time within this consciousness line versus this linear geographical journey, will bring us the same energy over and over again until we learn how to deal with it. And I just experienced one. PTSD survivors, CPTSD survivors understand what anniversary events are. Like, as you come up on a significant date, you will feel those emotions again. All of the darker energies and the shadow work that we are trying to do is also coming to us. So grief anniversaries, which will bring up grief, will often be the opportunity to resolve and release, to let go. Anniversary events are actually the repeating energy signature to allow you to release that energy to continue on. When a traumatic event results in someone's death, it causes an almost spiritual form of PTSD or CPTSD, in which that's exactly what the spirit is doing. Many get caught in the confusion and the bitterness of not being alive any longer. And that's why we get so many reports of angry spirits who want to, basically evict the living from the space that because they're still trying to claim it, because they can't relinquish their physical life. And that's where most of the horrible stories come from. We've all covered all the human entities that we can. What can you do with those? You can get in touch with a spiritual worker that is willing to contact spirits to try and help them release that burden, to get them to understand, hey, listen, this is terrible, but you did actually die. And there is something so much better waiting for you. All the love that you didn't have in this life is waiting for you. All the acceptance, all the safety, all the peace lies outside of this realm. Release this realm. It is actually the thing that is making you unhappy. And you can find spiritual workers, and I can do that work, and I have done that work. I really like helping the living heal, but in very pronounced situations, I will also help with guiding spirits towards that. I've only done it a few times. It always has to do for me for people who suffered tremendously right before death, who, again, it's like their suffering almost acts like an anchor. But for people who believe that they are being visited by the spirits of their loved ones, there is still one more form of, I will not call it a haunting because haunting has a negative connotation. There are people who their love in that fragment energy, that remnant energy, the love and connection that they feel for the living is not something they can relinquish because their soul is actually tied to it, which is why people sometimes feel protected by a grandmother, which is why some people feel as if their grandfather's spirit is still interacting with them. It is almost always a very selfless form of love, because that particular spirit has determined, I do not need to reincarnate until such time as I have soothed the earthly wounds that my absence has left behind. And that is still one more form of haunting. So, or visitation. Let's call that one visitation, because it is never upsetting to the person who is receiving it. It is always to let them know that death is simply transitioning to a different state of being versus being gone. You feel the physical absence of a person, but we are made of energy. We think of our lives as being about these bodies, when in fact, our life force, our soul, that which makes us unique, the thing that is connected to the divine and to the universe, is the thing that is animating this particular thing, the thing that is like plugged into that brain that operates our bodies. We are essentially utilizing this particular form as a living energy, but when this form no longer functions in a way that it has physical life, the spiritual life continues. And many religions try to determine what will happen after death, to tell people how to understand it, and telling you that like you have to be part of their religion to achieve life after death. You don't. Every major religion is trying to help people at its best, trying to help people understand how the divine interacts in their life and who they are meant to be and how to have the best experience and to release this earthly existence after we die by being the best people that we can be. And it gets turned into like a clannishness and an exclusionary thing. And if you don't believe what I believe, you're damned to the bad place, and we're going to the good place because you don't believe what we believe. And it's always like, if I sound like I'm mocking it, I am a little bit, because I was raised in the Christian religion. I do not practice it. I practice a form of Enochian magic that is celestial and angelic magic. And so I speak through the figureheads of that religion. But everything, as I have said before, is a universal truth being broken down into a narrative that we can process and understand in this form, but it is not a literal truth. And when it comes to things like Christians, what they are really being told is, if you wish to be saved by this particular figure, by Jesus Christ, it is not that you belong to the Christian religion, but rather that you inhabit and live the teachings of this particular figure, which include kindness, compassion, taking care of the sick, the injured, and the poor. And that's the way people are truly Christian. They think it means going to church and saying a phrase and getting dunked in running water. And that's a very literal interpretation of a book that is allegory. And do other people, will they call me a heretic and things for saying those things? Yes, they will. But that does not change the fact that that is a at least 2,000-year-old tome that has undergone a translation after a translation after a translation, and it has been proven that not all translations are saying the same things. And that there really isn't any form of the Bible that exists in a way that has not been altered, usually through a power structure. Now, it's very, very clear that I believe in something beyond, that I have actual real faith. But the God of religion is the man-made version of a connection to the divine, and to every single person is the ability to seek out the teachings that will lead them towards a better connection. And it's always very individual, and other people get to have different answers. But ones that exclude others based on you're not part of our club have not gotten it right. That is my firm belief, and I know through the work that I do and the feedback that I get and the number of times that I actually am right, that I am in contact with something that means people very well indeed. And so it is the divine. And I know that there are readers who believe that Doreen Virtue being a very famous one who decided that tarot readers were talking to demons. Doreen Virtue was corrupted by attachments to greed and a couple of other things. And that's why she became convinced that she was talking to demons, because attachments were actually interacting with her and pulling her in directions that didn't have to do with serving her highest good, but rather serving the desires of this earthly plane. And that can happen to anybody, and it's something that all spiritual workers have to guard against, the corruption that comes along with the ability to interact with something. Moving on from that, let's go on to one of the last forms, which is non-human entities, and how some non-human entities are angelic beings or beings of light. Don't think Bible, flappy wings when you think angel. Think something that comes from a pure light source that tries to guide people towards their best possible outcomes, towards the ability to guide this physical form to get the best outcomes, to help this particular life form quit destroying itself over and over again. Because that's the flaw with the human race, is we get to a certain level of advancement and we begin turning our technology against one another. We become again very clannish, very exclusionary, only the chosen will be given the path to spirituality or to any form of true connection to faith. And we do that over and over again. And part of the role of being connected is finding the way to overcome our lesser side, to be able to harness what this physical form can do so that we could all work together to cause basically this life form to have a civilization and a connection with one another that would allow this world to evolve and become the best that we could be. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still in the repeating cycles, and we're in a bad part of it right now. What that has to do with the idea of spirits and hauntings is that when you try and reach for something will try and reach back. And if you are experiencing envy, if you are experiencing greed, if you are experiencing all of these very normal things, the only thing it takes to overcome that influencing you versus the higher thing influencing you is an awareness of your frailties as a human being and the ways in which you can be misled by something that wants a particular output out of you instead of wanting what is best for you, which is what beings of light really want, is the best. And that's what we call angels, and they're beings of light, trying to guide us towards the best experience that we can have as human beings. So those non-human entities are good. Whenever you have a doubt about what you're interacting with, the easiest thing to do is invoke the Archangel Michael. Because, first of all, is the Archangel Michael a singular figure with the name the Archangel Michael? No. It is the purest form of a warrior energy sent to protect humanity. And in the Christian Bible, Michael fought the devil and won. Michael is the energy that is most attached to this earth that can defeat the darkest energy. And nothing but that energy can answer to that name. And so that is the thing to invoke if you are interested in doing, because no matter how much I say, please be careful with spirit mediumship. There are non-human entities that will mislead you, that even when it's not malicious, it can be a trickster energy. Sometimes it's a time-wasting energy, as in the case of almost all Ouija board and spirit board interactions. There are exceptions. If you are doing spirit board activity or Ouija board activity in a consecrated, blessed, cleared space, then you are more likely to get a real spirit. But if you're whipping out a Ouija board in the middle of a dinner party and like there's all this chaotic energy, you're not getting a real, even if you're interacting with a real spirit that needs to convey something to somebody, other things come through that opening. Remember, when you create that opening, more than what you're asking for can come through. And that is the experience that most people have with non-human entities. And they just kind of mess with people. And sometimes it's just a trickster energy. Sometimes it's deeply malicious. Sometimes it is something that is just really confused and unable to communicate very clearly. I do not recommend that people use spirit boards unless they are trained in how to be safe when reaching out into other realms, because you can get very, very sick indeed. And that's why so many poltergeists, which is a non-human entity that attaches to the extreme emotions of somebody within a household and exacerbates them and sometimes develops the ability to interact with that particular space almost as if it has a physical body. But it's why they're always associated with people in puberty, when our emotions are the extreme and like people are going all over the place because their bodies are as things develop. Those non-human entities are frequently attached to the anger, the emotional quality that can go along with that roller coaster ride that is puberty. And that is a non-human entity. And it can be cleared by spirit workers, but it has to be cleared by people who can do a form of exorcism. I can do exorcism, and I frequently have. I only do it through referrals from the workers that I already work with. So, like, there's never any point in sending me an email about how you have a demon in your basement and you want me to get it out. You have to come to me through a referral, and here is why. I have a limited amount of energy to do the amount of things that I need to do. And so I have to have somebody like Karen Rontowski is somebody who will refer people for me. There are several other people, it's mostly Reiki healers, that will bring me somebody who are like, yeah, I found this and it's freaking everybody out and it's done stuff to me too, and I'll take care of it. Every now and then I'll be working with somebody for a while and it has to do with a curse and we'll have to do some form of exorcism. But exorcism is not the thing I go towards as my way of life, because I really want people to heal within this lifetime and get their best outcomes and live their purposeful life, because every person's purpose is to participate in making this structure better. Now, there are people who inhabit a neutral energy and they're here to have a different lifespan and a different life lesson than I'm living. And there are people who are here learning their karmic lessons who go towards giving into their darker side or just giving into pleasure, as we're here just to experience this physical form. We're not here to participate. If you are drawn towards the idea of a life's purpose, then your life's purpose is, how do I participate in helping this particular living structure get the best out of it that it can be? Non-human entities are the things that people are most likely to encounter, and they can be very, very skilled at mimicking human spirits. Sometimes they have a lot of access to your train of thought, and so they're able to pull from your memories as well. And it is part of the reason that when people are grief-stricken, I will do something for them for a closure read, and then I tell them very honestly, please avoid spirit mediumship. Don't try and hold on to this relationship through a spirit medium. It attracts something that wants to exploit that way too easily. And even really good spirit mediums can sometimes be interacting with something that's just very, very skilled. It is a realm that is difficult. When you are dealing with anything that does not have a corporeal form, it is best to approach it with a level of caution that will keep everybody really safe. And some spirit mediumships do not believe in things like demons. And I know, like, for a fact, from some of the things that I've interacted with and helped people with and the feedback I've gotten afterwards, that even if we're not using the correct terminology, there is something sinister that sometimes tries to influence people for the outcomes that they want. Sometimes it will simply manifest as a form of mental illness, but sometimes there are really drastic things going around people. And this is where I come to the please, please, please get fully trained before you attempt spirit mediumship. Because one of the, an exorcism I did do not that long ago that was through a client who had been referred to me, but she did not initially have an attachment, happened because she was doing spirit mediumship, attempting to be trained in it, and they had not taught her any protective practices. And so she had things like dead animals in her home, and like all kinds of things were going weird and funky and wrong. And in fact, even though she had very good intent, as she drew towards her what she was trying to talk to, something else came and stayed because she wasn't closing out the portals that she was opening. And that is why it's very, very important to learn preferably some magic practices around protection. Even if you're not going to do spell work, you need to learn how to clear. You need to learn how to cast a circle. You need to learn how to have protective crystal grids in place if you're going to be doing really high level spirit mediumship. It is what I'm always trying, the analogy I use is anything that involves non-material interaction is just like having sex, and don't have unprotected sex because God knows what you will catch. And the same thing goes with reaching into spirit spaces or non-material spaces or non-entity or non-human entity spaces, is that you need to be protected so that you don't catch something that can infect you. And again, that's the easiest way. That's the story, the way it is worded to help you understand what can happen. Having said that, some people are natural spirit mediums. Some people have had spirits coming to them their whole lives. I have always rejected them. And one of the things I have not really ever talked about is that there is a corresponding element to each season. And as I'm talking to you on the Day of the Dead, we are moving into the season ruled by air. And air is very, very important to the idea of all forms of psychic connection, spirit connection, magic as well. Magic needs all the elements. But in order to speak to something that no longer has a physical body, it needs to be comprised almost entirely out of air. So we are moving into this period of the year that is ruled by air, as the ground rests, as everything sleeps, as we go into, if you look at Greek mythology, Persephone having to go back down to Hades for the season of the year where the earth lies fallow and everything regenerates over the course of winter. We are moving into essentially the dead zone of the growing year. In the spring, that is ruled by fire, the beginning of new things, the birth of new things, the sometimes chaotic start of things. The summer is nurtured by water, that is the season of water. And then the fall is about earth. When we gather all of our resources, we reap what has been grown throughout the growing seasons, and we store up for this particular season. So as we move into the season of the year ruled by air, this is the Day of the Dead, and the period right before this is the time that we can release karmic burdens, karmic curses, karmic energies. If you follow me on Instagram or on my YouTube channel, you saw that I did a different offering every day for all of October, which involved being very, very creative because it all had to do with baked goods and sweets. And it usually is best to do offerings that remind what you're talking to of their earthly pleasures. So some people will use alcohol and tobacco and things that I don't, because in my ancestral line, there's a lot of problems with substance abuse, if not outright addiction. My grandmother was an alcoholic, but my father actually didn't drink. He just smoked like a train. There's a substance abuse problem in my genetic line. And so I always use like sugar being the least damaging thing and I'm sure there are people out there, nutritionists out there saying sugar is the devil. Sugar is not good for you. But here's the thing. You can't just live this earthly existence trying to do everything that is good for you, because pleasure holds a place as well. And so offerings are usually about invoking pleasure or making people feel, or the things that you're inviting into your home, into your life, into your energy, making those things feel pleasurable things as well. I'm looking forward to a season with far less sugar, because it was, I guess, 33 days, including the start. And then I did something yesterday as well, trying to make sure that I released and resolved all ancestral ties, including some tendencies towards the attachments like wrath, like greed, like envy, like all of the things that weigh all of our souls down that we need to overcome. And again, they will always be a little bit present, but when you've healed that part of yourself and you feel that stirring, you know that it is attached to something that you need to address within your emotional well-being to assuage that need rising up. Is learning how to take care of yourself appropriately is the thing that helps us disconnect from those darker energies to still have that dark energy available to us. Because the wrath is the one that I'll use as an example. Wrath is destructive. Righteous anger is the thing that often helps people be fueled towards helping a society or a person or a life make meaningful change. And so it has a place. Anger can tell us we're not safe and we need to correct something. Wrath almost always destroys around us our personal relationship and our ability to love. And we're all trying to learn how to live in conjunction with our darker energy without letting it rule us. So as we move into the season of air, it is a time that many people will have more spirit interactions. And if you are experiencing something that you do not like, or if you're trying to reach out, let me tell you the methods that will help you the most to stay safe. Because no matter how many times I say, please don't do magic you don't understand, please don't go towards things that you have not researched. I literally just had somebody contact me about a spell they were doing, and they didn't protect it at all. And it was to open their psychic eye. And so I replied at length how to protect themselves, but it was also a case of like, that was ill-advised magic. People want to do more sometimes than they're ready to do. It is human nature. I'm not going to say that I haven't also done things where it was like, oh, it was a mistake. It honestly, I have, and I've had to do a lot of cleanup in the aftermath, both of magic and of things that I've reached for, because it is part of a learning curve. It's not about being. We all do ill-advised things. It's part of how we learn. Mistakes help us learn. So no matter how many times I'm like, please fully prepare, people learn through their mistakes, and it's a normal thing. So let's cover the ways that if you did, as a for instance, and legal disclaimer over and over again, I am not advising you do this. Do everything at your own peril. These are the ways to try and keep yourself safe. It always starts with clean your space. And it is not about shaming people. Cleanliness is next to. It's not that. It is that if you want to have a fresh and a healthy experience, what you want to do is get rid of all the old gunk, all the old energetic gunk, all of the decaying energy around you, to try and, I always liken it to performing surgery. If you're going to cut into something, you want to scrub that area so nothing infects it. So clean your space. And if you are experiencing a difficulty that comes from anxiety or depression, you're like, I just can't, I get so overwhelmed, clean the space that you'll be using then. Remember, spirits do not like vinegar, by the way. So a vinegar and water with a couple of like 2 or 3 drops of lemon essential oil or lavender essential oil, and both will be great. Rosemary as well, sprayed down and wiped off, particularly in any type of doorways. Clear anything that looks like a doorway, because it's great energy for a portal. Clear your space, clean it, and then clear it. The easiest way to form a crystal grid is, for people who are seeing the video, you will see the pieces I'm holding up. This is a piece of selenite. This is amethyst, which will protect your psychic eye. This is black onyx. Black onyx, black tourmaline, and black obsidian are the best protective devices. On all four corners of my desk, I have 3 pieces like that so that this particular space is always protected by an energetic grid. Now, I will have clients who have such strong attachments that I still have to clear in between clients frequently. And behind me is something called a salt bowl. That is part of the How to Break Curses playlist on YouTube. I teach people how to make that salt bowl there. I also have a salt bowl behind me, which I always put out when I'm told to. I get told to at the beginning of the day. I do a draw and it kind of warns me what I'm going to be facing, and I take the proper steps. For like just doing this as a hobby or learning how to do things, prepare your space by cleaning, by clearing with something that will clear the space. I do not recommend people using sage and Palo Santo because they are both endangered. That said, they will work. And it is important to respect resources, because if people won't listen on the please use juniper or please use rosemary, please use lavender, sooner or later, we're all going to be out of Palo Santo and sage. And so try to go towards plentiful alternatives. And that is rosemary, that is juniper. Lemon is also a great one, as is lavender. There are several other things as well. Star anise is one of the things. Some people pronounce it star anise. I believe it's star anise. Can be ground up and put onto a charcoal briquette for incense. That will also clear your space. It's a grounding element. Grounding elements, flax seeds help protect as well. That's another grounding element. Cloves help dominate, allow your will to dominate. These are spices that you can use as well. I don't recommend cinnamon for protection. Cinnamon is like, it's an accelerant basically in things. It causes things to happen very rapidly. But look into protective practices. Always smoke cleanse or moon water cleanse or incense cleanse any tools that you use. So if you're going to be using a spirit board, if you're going to be using a pendulum, if you're going to be using any of those things, they need to be cleansed in between. Smoke cleansing, you just hold it in the smoke of something. I personally usually use incense. You can use moon water and just wipe things down. You can use just water that you have blessed and empowered. If you don't have moon water on hand, you can pour out some spring water is great. If you don't have it available to you, you can use tap water. It is best to let it sit out for 12 hours so that any chemicals in it have a chance to evaporate. But you can also simply use water that you have blessed and empowered. Please remember, water that has had salt added to it will usually leave a stain behind, but salt water is also very cleansing. There is one more step you can take that can really help, and I don't have it in this particular room, because I do so much cleansing all the time, I don't particularly need it. Please remember, a small bowl of sea salt with a lemon in it in all 4 corners of a room is one of the ways to keep your space clear. On my YouTube channel, there is a recipe for how to make a clearing spray that does not contain Palo Santo or sage, white sage, that teaches how the method behind clearing a room, but I'm going to teach it to you very, very quickly, which is that a puff of everything in all 4 corners and one dead center. It's called a 5-point fixing pattern in magic, but you can use it for clearing as well. And that is one for each of the elements and one that is for actually Metatron or the things that protect your psychic eye when you're clearing. And do you have to recite anything? You absolutely can, but you do not need to. There are multiple verses that are available to people. I use Psalm 91 or Psalm 23 a great deal because, again, I practice celestial and angelic magic, which works with a lot of the Psalms as well. I'm trying to think of anything else. The other thing is to remember, pay attention to how you feel when you're interacting with something to make sure that you're interacting with something that's safe. If you ever feel slightly nauseous, if you feel headachy, if you suddenly feel very tired, it's time to stop. If you have this weird, heavy feeling behind your eyes, it's time to stop. And the best thing to do is clear right afterwards and then go get some exercise, because it's almost like it forces it out of your system as you change your brain chemistry. So eat something, drink something, get some exercise after engaging in any form of spirit mediumship. And if you don't feel well enough to, it means you've come in contact with something and you need to do a full clearing. Use a selenite wand all over you, particularly on the nape of your neck as well, is one of the things that you can do. And then don't forget spiritual baths or spiritual showers in which you use sea salt combined with sometimes Epsom salt, and a couple of drops, if your skin can tolerate it, of essential oil like lavender, like rosemary. You end up smelling fantastic, by the way. But please do, like, I can put almost anything on my skin at this point, but not everybody can. From Trader Joe's, there is a lavender sea salt scrub that actually works very well. So remember, you can look for things that are natural that contain lavender to scrub off with as well if you don't want to have the salt scrub in your shower and or bath. That I think pretty much covers what hauntings are and what ghosts are and how to interact with them safely. I'm trying to think of anything that would help people as they go forward. I guess the only thing that I would really like to say in closing here is that if you have lost a loved one, if you have seen somebody lost to a tragedy, if something unexpected happened and took that person from your physical space and from your physical life, you will feel that aching loss, and you may not feel the presence of their spirit, but they're still available to you because, honest to goodness, what we are is so far more complicated than what is contained in a physical body. Sometimes you're not able to feel that person's spirit any longer because you're weighed down by grief and a darker emotion. We forget grief quite frequently contains anger. So wait until you've processed those emotions. And please remember that when you're in the most pain, you may not truly get the best interactions because of those non-human entities that try to exacerbate or feed off of those emotions. It is my personal belief that it is best to accept when a lifespan has come to an end and to release that. Having said that, the whole reason, because a few years ago, I was doing a monthly read for my YouTube channel, and in it, and it always had some messages for me, I just never knew where they were. Like, I'm not allowed to know much beforehand. I'm on a need-to-know basis. It was all about somebody developing spirit mediumship, and it was going to happen for them quite suddenly, and it was going to be very surprising. And in this particular reading, I'm even sitting there going, well, thank goodness it's not me, because I really, it's just not the path I would have chosen for myself. And then again, I'm going to be changing a couple details here to protect the person's privacy. But I had someone come to me for a reading. There is a deck that I only use for spirit guide reads, and I now only use it for spirit mediumship too, because this is the first time it happened. I laid out the cards. I looked in the person's cards, and I was 100% positive there was a teenage boy there. And I said it out loud, and it turned out to be this person's relative who had been murdered. And that's the full extent of the details I'm going to share, but a lot happened after that, and I found out that this particular spirit was trying to come through that small opening because there was a message that they needed to get to their mother, and it was a very important message. And there were a lot of details I could not possibly have known that proved that it was the spirit of this particular person. And the message that was sent was so selfless, and it was the one thing holding this spirit back. The majority of this spirit, this soul, was staying in a disincarnate space as long as it could, because his mother was suffering so very much from his loss. And that achieved the ability to let him go. So every now and then, there are instances where I'm like, no, it's the right thing. It's the right thing. Spirit mediumship as a way of life, as a profession, can help people with their pain so very much. But I do caution people against, your relationships are best conducted in the 3D with people who are here in the 3D as well. Because those who are gone are no longer living a life you can truly understand, and they lose their ability to truly understand the challenges of this world as well. And our comfort is best found with one another and the people who are sharing our experience with us. The best thing for spirit mediumship is to understand that that person, that entity, that soul, that being still loves you, is still there, and is still available, and that their absence is not permanent. It is simply for the remainder of your physical time here. And that's like my final word on spirit mediumship. Please go forward and be safe in it. And again, Day of the Dead felt like the right day to do this. I have no idea when I'll put this up, maybe next week. I'm not very structured in this, in case you have not figured that part out. I do what I'm called to do. And I was called to do this today, and I hope it helped you. If you hear nothing else, always, 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 whenever I'm talking about tarot, divination, magic, spirit mediumship, I always ask you to try and keep yourself safe. because there are very destructive things that can really screw up a person's life. And it's hard because until it reaches a very pitched level, they frequently won't reach out for help. And they've suffered often needlessly simply because they didn't take the preventative and the protective steps. Whenever you reach into something other than a physical realm, make sure that you are anchored in this realm, that you are grounded, that you are aligned, and that you are protected. And sometimes nothing will happen. But when something does happen, it will be very authentic and very pure. Okay. So this has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica, talking about ghosts, spirits, haunting, what causes them, the different types of hauntings. If you want to book me for a private reading or for a life coaching session, and life coaching sessions are where I help people figure out how to heal what they need to heal so they can get the best outcomes that they can have. You can do so at therisingmoon.com, and that is the only way to book me. You can always find me here at Logical Magic, examining esoterica, and I have a YouTube channel called Cronecast at the Rising Moon as well. Take care, be well in any realm that you walk in, tread carefully and protect yourself. And remember, we all have gifts, but some of us have different ones. And if a realm is closed off to you, it's not because you're less powerful, it's because you have a different calling. Okay, take care, be well.